Hello guys, welcome to lesson number 49 in our drawing series, Drawing Techniques for Beginners. Towards the end of last lesson we started adding our HB pencil to some of the darker areas of our Statue of Liberty drawing. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to start introducing the 2B pencil. So we're going to start working in those darkest areas and then bringing some of the HB back out, and then hopefully what we're going to look at is getting a good coverage now of 2H in most of the areas, which is then going to allow us to then start developing the depth in some of these darker areas. It's been really great seeing some of your work over on the Facebook group. Come and join us if you haven't already done so. Come and have a look at the Facebook group. It's called Tutorial Tuesdays Beginners to Pro. That's over on Facebook. Ask to join. You'll find all of the lessons there, and you'll also find all of the reference images. We just have a good chat about art in general and share some of our work. So it'd be really great to see you on there. But without further ado, let's crack on. I've freshened up my kneaded eraser. I've got my 3 pencils that we're going to be using here. And let's get started with this 2B pencil. Now, if we followed the same structure that we've been doing with the other lessons in this drawing so far, what we're going to do is we're going to have a nice smooth application of this 2B pencil now. Because we've conditioned the paper with the 2H and the HB, we've now started to fill in the tooth of the paper with some of the harder graphite, which now means that as I start to apply this 2B pencil, we're getting a beautiful coverage, and we're not getting that grainy look, which if we'd have just started by going straight in with the 2B, because obviously we're looking at this value and we can see that this is quite a dark value. You know, you could even go up to a sort of a 4 or a 6B in that zone. But if we'd have started with that, what we'd have had a very grainy look. And then what most artists go in and do is they use a blending stump or a tortillon or a Q-tip or a tissue paper or something like that to actually give them a smoother value. Now the problem with that is, once you've ingrained the value or the graphite or the charcoal, whatever it is that you're using, down into the tooth of the paper, which is ultimately what you're doing when you're using a blending stump or your finger or something like that. Yes, it gives you a very nice coverage. It takes out the pencil strokes and it gets rid of some of the toothiness of the paper. But the issue that you've then got is we cannot take any of that value out. Now, as you see, as we sort of work along in this drawing, we're going to be taking out subtle values in certain areas, and that's what gives us a realism. So this face here, for example, we've got very subtle value changes sort of around the eye at the bottom here and at the top of this nose area there. We've got some very light tones. Now, if I just bear down with a tortillon and we have a sort of a very smooth coverage there, it's almost impossible for me to recreate those value changes, because we're going to be using our kneaded eraser in order to give us those value changes. So for me, this laying down of the graphite in a very slow and methodical way, although it does take a little bit longer, it really does add to the realism of the overall piece once we get towards the end. I've said before in most of the videos that we're not really trying to rush this. So, you know, if this takes us 5 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours, as long as we're not under a time constraint because we're doing a commission for somebody, then I really don't mind taking my time. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned over the last few years when I have been drawing, is to just be patient, let the drawing build up, let the values build up, and you can sit for an hour sometimes and really think that you haven't made much headway. But then all of a sudden your drawing springs to life, and what we're left with is a very realistic and very detailed piece. So that's the method that I'm trying to teach you all. Obviously, it's the beauty of art is there's no right and wrong way of doing anything. This is the way that I do things. And I think that as a foundation and as a way of learning a technique that we can then build upon. I think this is, certainly for me, one of the best ways of doing it. And what we also do is we also get an understanding of what each of the pencils does. Now, I've had a lot of you over on the group saying that you'd never used a 2H pencil before. We can even use a 4H pencil to get some very subtle lighter tones. And a lot of you have said, oh, you've never used your 2H pencil or your 4H pencil. Well, what a wonderful thing to be able to now do in terms of using your whole array of pencils. But again, the beauty of it is that we can actually get some quite dark values by tricking the mind. So if I'm using a 2H or a 4H in a certain area, I don't need to go up to an 8B in the darker areas, because what I'm doing is I'm developing contrast. Now, for those of you that have been with me for quite some time now, it's a good few months now. I think we started these videos back in May time, 2019. And for those of you that have been with me all of that time, you'll know that one of my teaching points, I guess you could say, one of the things that I really try and emphasize and keep going over and reiterating is the contrast. Contrast in your drawings is one of the most important elements that you need to try and capture. And what I mean by contrast is identifying on your drawing whereabouts the darkest zones are. So on this Statue of Liberty, it's very, very clear to me that the area that I'm working on now, this hole in the crown area, is one of the darkest areas. This series of holes going around is a very, very dark value, and it's one of the darkest values, if not the darkest value on there. Now, what I need to do is I need to make sure that on my drawing, this is also one of the darkest areas, if not the darkest area. But then also identifying the lightest areas. So this left-hand side of the hand or the arm is a very light, almost white patch. And it's the contrast between the darkest and the lightest areas that develops the realism in our drawing. And this is why we start with the darkest areas. I've seen a lot of artists teaching various different methods, and I've seen lots of artists that actually start in the lightest zones. I don't do that for that reason of balancing the values out. If I start in the lightest zone, so if I'd have started drawing in this lightest zone, I may have gone too dark there, which then means that I need to go even darker in my darkest areas. So with this method of starting in the darkest areas, I can build the values up, work my way towards the lightest zones, and then reach a point where we're happy with it because we've developed enough contrast without then having to go into the 6B, 7B, 8B, 9B range. Now, some people might want to do that, but I'm trying to teach you this method that is very simple. We're only using 6, maybe 7 pencils maximum. And we're understanding that just because something is black on the actual reference image, we don't have to create black in our drawing in order for us to have a drawing that's realistic and represents the reference image. What we're looking for is contrast. So I might go to a 4B in these zones and actually look at it and go, do you know what? I'm quite happy with that. But if I'd started in the lightest areas, by the time I got to working in the darkest zones, a 4B may not cut it, because I might have gone to a 2B in this lighter zone, which then means to develop the contrast, the contour, and the structure of the drawing, I need to then go much darker. So I need to go through an 8B, a 9B, which takes longer in the process and in a lot of cases is unnecessary. I've seen a few of your Statues of Liberty already over on the Facebook group. They're looking great. I'm really impressed with some of the homestead drawings that I've been seeing. It's nice seeing people kind of keeping up with the group, but just a couple of lessons behind. It makes me feel less pressure to get the next video out. I know some of you are right up to date. I think Dolores, forgive me, I forget the second name off the top of my head, but I think Dolores is who's an avid member of the group, and lots of nice comments coming from Dolores. I think you're right up to date with us. I think you're sort of chomping at the bit for the next lesson. So I hope that you enjoy this one, where we're just starting to add now some of this 2B into these darker zones. Now, I do like to try and keep these videos down to about 30 minutes. I know that I can sort of get the message across as to what we're trying to achieve in a particular lesson in around about 30 minutes. So I think the emphasis today is to really start to bring out some of these darker zones with the 2B. And then once we're happy we've got some value into those darker zones, is to then start building the values up around the darkest zone, again with the HB and the 2H, so that we then start to almost cover the entire drawing. And then after we've got a nice coverage throughout, we can then really start playing with the values, taking some value away with our kneaded eraser, maybe going up the pencil grade, so maybe into a 4B or a 6B. But I'm using a tapered stroke to really feather this on. If I was to sort of boil down my last 3 and a bit years now of learning and experimenting, and say what are the two things that you would try and get across to people the most. The first one would be how lightly we have to apply this graphite. So I'm using my pencil, I'm holding it quite far away from the actual point of my pencil, and I'm using this tapered stroke, which is a pulling action towards me. I'm not scribbling, I'm not pushing away. And I'm trying to match the lines, because it's really a series of lines is what I'm building the value up with. I'm not trying to scribble. There's no forwards and backwards, pulling and pushing motion. So that would be one of my sort of 2 top tips. And the second one, like I've already mentioned, is contrast. Okay, I'm going to start to build some of this darker value in now into this hairline. Now again, the beauty of what we've already done is we've got this underlying value which has been made up of the 2B and 2H and the HB, and now I'm coming over the top of this with the HB. I'm getting a lovely smooth application, but we're now starting to ramp up the contrast, and this is now going to start pulling the edge of this forehead in and out. It's going in at the darkest areas, and it pulls out as it goes more towards the nose, so we've got this rounded look to it, and it's only by creating this contrast that we're able to do that. And I say to people that it's really round about this 2B stage, when we start introducing the 2B pencil, that we really start to see some of the realism and shape starting to take form. So I'm just layering very finely. I keep turning my pencil. And because I'm holding the pencil at an angle, I'm not bearing straight down into the paper with it. I'm not sitting vertically. I'm only using a very, very small portion of the tip of the pencil lead. And as I keep moving my pencil, keep turning it in my fingers, what I then have is I have this self-sharpening effect. I won't sharpen this pencil throughout this lesson, so for the next 20 minutes at least, or however long we've got on this video, you won't see me needing to sharpen this. I do clean them up a little bit at the start of every new session, so I do just give them a quick spin in my sharpener. And I'm actually, some people were asking about sharpeners the other day, so this is the sharpener that I have. It's an X-Acto vacuum mount, so it's a mechanical. It attaches to my tabletop via this arm, and I think I got this a couple of years ago. It's just from the local art shop. It's metal, and I just obviously put the pencil in and give that a quick spin around. I've used various different mechanical sharpeners before. That one served me well. It's not, it's not the greatest piece of engineering that mankind has come up with. It sometimes doesn't stick to the tabletop, and I have issues with that. But for all that I'm sharpening, it does me absolutely fine. So let me show you what I'm going to do now. Because I've now started to get this darker value in there, I need to then come in with the HB pencil, which was the last layer that we did before the 2B, and just start to bring the value further out towards the highlighted area on this hair. And again, I'm still starting in the darkest zone, and I'm still building the value up. Even with this HB pencil, although we've got a 2B in there, this HB is still going to increase the value. And what we're doing is we're layering one on top of the other. So just because we've reached a 2B now in this level, in this area, it's not as though I'm now going to neglect that and never use the HB again. I may even use the 2H as well. In fact, I will use the 2H. I'll use the 2H to blend it all out. So if I have any rough transitions, I'm going to use my 2H pencil to just blend those out a little bit. So paying particular attention to the light and how the light is reacting to this part of the hair. So we can see that we've got a dimension going this way, but it also, as it comes in towards this center part of the hair, it goes in slightly there. So we need to make sure that this area in here is dark and fades out this way to lighter. At the same time, it's coming from bottom to top as well. And it's this attention to detail that we're going to strive for throughout our drawing, no matter what we're drawing, whether it's a pet portrait, the homestead that we did in the last series or the last group of lessons. We're looking for these opportunities to have depth, dimension. We're convincing the person looking at our drawing that what they're actually seeing is something that has dimension to it, that has rounded edges, and we're doing that by subtle value changes. We never draw lines on anything, so we never want a situation where I've got an outline of a nose or an outline of, I guess the closest we're going to get to having lines on this are these eyebrows. But rather than just bearing down with the pencil and making a 2B or a 4B gouge in the paper, we're building it up gradually. So I initially started with my 2H in there. And now I'm just going to lightly taper over the top of the 2H with some HB now. And we're going to bring it up to the value necessary in a gentle series of sessions or sittings. We're not just going to plough straight in and go, well, I know, I could pretty much look at this drawing now and tell you straight away that we're going to go up to a 7B, even the Prismacolor coloured pencil in the dark areas. I know that we're going to have some 2B, maybe a little bit of 4B under this eye area here. We're going to have 2B in the eyebrows. The rest of it's going to be made up in this face of HB, 2H, possibly a little bit of 2B in there. So I instinctively know that now from working with various drawings over the years. But just because I know that these eyebrows are going to have 2B in them, I'm not just going straight away in there and starting with a 2B. I'm building the values up in exactly the same way that I would build the values up on one of my spheres or the barrels that some of you have been doing. So the only implement that we ever use to, if you want to call it blend, but just to move some of the graphite around, is my soft brush. This is a 2-inch, very soft, I can't remember if it's a camel hair brush now or something like that. And I'm just moving the graphite around a little bit. Not bearing down heavily with it at all. Now these pencils that I use are called Caran D'ache grafwood. They're quite a soft pencil, so what I find with these is we do get quite a lot of movement with the graphite, so it does move around a little bit, almost too much at times. So it's something that I'm conscious of. So tidying up the edges of my drawings are something that I spend a fair bit of time on in between sessions. I think we're probably going to add a subtle background to this drawing because I want to emphasize those highlighted areas, particularly on the wrist underneath the torch. And again, it's all about contrast. So if I'm trying to emphasize a very light area here, what it's sitting on top of or next to needs to be darker. So I'm going to struggle to produce that very light look if the background it's sitting on is also very light. And you can see that we've got some detailing in the representations really of what the hair is doing. We've got these curly lines, these curved lines in there. So I'm actually going to pop those in a second using my 2B pencil very lightly. But what I want to do first is I want to get a good coverage of this HB moving up towards the edge of this hairline where we see the hair curving back onto itself. I'm just making sure again I'm reinforcing these darkest areas, so this crease in here, but I'm not just going in and drawing a line. I'm starting each time in the darkest area, which is this very, very tight recess right in between the face and the hairline. I'm starting there and working my way out every time. So I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 strokes of my pencil, starting in the darkest zone. And obviously 15 is not the golden number. I was just counting them just so that you got an understanding of what I was doing. I'm starting in the recess and I'm gradually moving out towards the lightest area on the section that I'm drawing, which is over on this area towards the top. And because I keep adding more and more lines in the darkest area, that is what builds the value up. The pressure that I'm using with my pencil is the same. But for argument's sake, let's say that this section now that I'm working on, this dark area, this might have 500 lines where I've started with the 2H, then the HB, now the 2B. This might have 500 lines in there. It might have 5,000. I don't know. I really have no idea of what the actual number is. But as we work out towards this lighter zone, that might only have 50 lines. And I've not gone into that with the 2B pencil either. So the value is being built up by the number of times I've gone over that area, combined with the softness of the pencils as well. So my darkest areas are not only going to have the darkest pencils in there, they're also going to have the most amount of pencil strokes in there too. And it's those two things combined that saturates the tooth of our paper. And by saturates, I mean we work to almost the limit of what the tooth of the paper can take. Not because we're burnishing the paper, which is pressing on too hard and flattening the tooth of the paper. That is one way of stopping the paper from taking any more value. We're just completely filling up those little indentations in the paper with these thousands of pencil strokes working up and down the pencil grades. And it's that we're really trying to emphasize in our lessons. So what I might do now is, and again this is the process that we go through, now I've got a nice coverage of value in there, I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm just going to look on the reference image at where it's the lightest, and I'm just going to gently tap back now some of the value in there. Now this can be slightly blotchy looking, but I'm not worrying too much, because what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to rebrush, and then using my 2H pencil, I'm just going to blend, again working from the darkest area. So even the 2H pencil, which is unbelievable, it was unbelievable to me the first few times I ever practiced and got to grips with this technique, that even though I've got 2B pencil in there, I've got layers of 2B, HB and 2H, I can still affect the value within this darker area, even with my 2H. So I'm working in the darkest zone there, and I'm gradually building it out. And the area that I've now removed some of the value with my kneaded eraser, that is going to remain lighter the whole time now that I'm drawing than the areas beneath, these areas here, that I didn't remove any of the value. And that's a process that we can repeat. It's very, very useful for creating smooth transitions from one value to another. So I brush again. And then back in with my 2B. And now, because I have got this fine layer of 2B moving out and away from the darkest zone, I don't have these big lines between one value and the next. And if I did, I can tap it back slightly with the kneaded eraser, and I can come back in with the brush, use the 2H. And this is what I was talking about. If I'd have gone in with the with the tortillon or the blending stump in the early stages, what I'm doing now would be absolutely impossible. This gentle massaging of the values, creating these very subtle changes, would be absolutely impossible. So back in with the 2H, again starting in the darkest zone and just gently feathering these tapered strokes out towards the lightest part of the zone that I'm drawing. So what I'm going to do now, just to show you, is I'm just going to start adding some of the hair details around here. I can see that we're on about 30 minutes now for the length of the video, which is sort of where we want it to be. So we've got some interesting shapes in here. They're not all regimented. They're not the same shape. They're not the same value. So even within our dark line, we're going to have some areas that are slightly darker than others. And I don't want just a dark line in there, because the light is affecting this shape. But also, if you look, they are going to be indentations. So these hair strokes are indentations. They're going to be sitting lower. So not only have we got the contour going from up and down, but around these hairlines, we're going to have a contour going the opposite direction to this one as well. So we just want to try and create that if we can. Again, just by fading out to the top and bottom of each hair stroke as well. So what we're now doing is we've got this very complex series of peaks and valleys, I guess, we've got in this hairline. And again, people may think that this is slightly picky and, why would I spend so much time on that? Let's just get a dark line in there. But it's these tiny, tiny opportunities that we have that, yes, individually, it probably doesn't amount to very much. But overall, when we've taken opportunities within the eyes to do something, and we've taken opportunities in the crown, the combination is what takes our drawing to another level. Again, I'm just building the value up softly. I've gone over this one area 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 times to build the value up. And remember that our laws of light, the further away something is from the light source, the darker it is going to appear, even if that is in a dark area. So I'm being very careful to monitor this now, that what I'm getting is a true representation of what I'm seeing on the image. And these lines here are not all the same value. We have some lines in there that are they've got 3 or 4 different value changes within them. So I'm looking for the point that's darkest and the point that is lightest. And I'm recreating that with my 2B pencil. I might want to brush those in slightly, just to take the harshness out of them, because they're not harsh, they're subtle, and as it comes towards the the centre of this hair, you can barely see them. So these are going to be much, much lighter now than they were down towards the bottom. And I guess that's because the light is hitting this. We're not seeing those indentations anywhere near the same as we are towards the bottom. But ultimately, it's just obeying the laws that we just spoke about. This is the darkest area. This is where the light is struggling to reach the most. So not only is this going to be the darkest crease between the hairline, it's the pieces coming away from it are also going to be the darkest. And I can blend that out again. I'm going to use my HB now just to add a little bit of value. And because I've got those textures and those details in there now, as I build the value up, it builds the value of those up as well. So those lines are going to remain the darkest area because there's already value there. And as I add value, it increases the value of the lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue just adding that 2B. We're going to finish the crown off here. I'm going to use the same process that we've used on this side, on this right-hand side of the hair. So towards the end of this this sort of session, I'm going to carry on for probably another hour now, adding some value in here. I'm going to bring the nostrils out with the 2B and some of the eyes, a little bit in the mouth area there. And then what we will start to do in the next lesson is really start to add some more value into this arm area here and possibly around this area. I'm definitely going to add some value into this neck area with the 2B. Same process. Just bringing the value out. It's a very dark section under there. We've got some brilliant contrast that we want to maintain. So yeah, same process that we've been going through. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've sort of tried to really start breaking down exactly what we're doing now. I'm enjoying this. I think we've probably got maybe another 3 or 4 lessons that we're going to have for this, and then we'll sort of be completing it. I'm going to start bringing some of the dark values up here. There's the contrast, very dark. Very dark. We need those areas. But I think our Statue of Liberty's building up quite nicely. Thank you so much as always for watching once again and supporting the channel and the Facebook group. You're a really good group to be part of. You know, it's adult. We're all getting along and we're all supporting each other. So thanks so much for that. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Smack the notifications icon, which is the little bell icon next to the big red button. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really does make a big difference when people are supporting it that way. Doesn't cost you anything to just give it a like and a subscribe. And I look forward to speaking to you in the group, and I'll see you in the next video. Hit subscribe, smack the notifications button, follow me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.